Welcome to my channel, where we dive deep into the most shocking family secrets and mysteries that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. If you're ready for a story that will grip you from the very first word and refuse to let go, then you're in exactly the right place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because today's story is one you absolutely cannot miss. My name is Cordelia Ravencrest, and I am 93 years old. They tell me I'm dying, though I've been dancing with death for so long now that we've become old friends. The doctors speak in hushed tones about weeks, maybe days, but there's something I must tell you before I cross that final threshold. Something that has haunted me for 7 decades. Something that will change everything you think you know about love, sacrifice, and the terrible choices we make to protect the ones we cherish most. You see, my daughter-in-law, Seraphina Blackthorne, found my diary yesterday. I heard her gasp from my bedroom, heard the leather-bound journal crash to the floor, heard her footsteps as she fled down the hallway. She doesn't know that I know. She doesn't realize that these old ears still catch whispers through thin walls, that these clouded eyes still see the tremor in her hands when she brings me my morning tea. Poor Seraphina. 20 years she's been part of this family, and she's never understood why I kept her at arm's length, why I watched her with such careful scrutiny, why I seemed to measure her every word, every gesture, every breath. She thought it was disapproval, perhaps even cruelty. How could she have known it was protection? But let me start from the beginning, because every story worth telling requires you to understand the roots before you can comprehend the branches that grew wild and twisted in the darkness. It was 1951 when I first laid eyes on Magnus Thornfield. I was 22, working as a seamstress in London's East End, my fingers permanently stained with ink from the accounting books I kept for my father's struggling textile business. The war had ended, but its scars remained etched into every brick, every face, every heart that had survived those terrible years. We were all trying to rebuild, to find meaning in a world that had been shattered and hastily reassembled. Magnus was unlike anyone I had ever encountered. Tall and lean, with eyes the color of storm clouds and hands that moved like a pianist's. Graceful, deliberate, mesmerizing. He appeared at our shop on a Tuesday morning in March, claiming he needed several suits tailored for business meetings. But I could tell immediately that he was no ordinary businessman. There was something in the way he carried himself, something ancient and otherworldly that made the very air around him seem to shimmer with possibility. When he spoke, his voice carried accents I couldn't place, sometimes crisp and English, other times flowing with what might have been Italian, occasionally roughened by what could have been Russian consonants. He was a mystery, wrapped in perfectly tailored wool, and I was utterly, hopelessly captivated. "Miss Ravencrest," he said on that first day, somehow knowing my name before I had introduced myself. "I believe we have much to discuss." I should have run. Every instinct I possessed screamed warnings that echoed in the deepest chambers of my heart. But when Magnus smiled, that devastating crooked smile that seemed to hold secrets older than cathedrals, I was lost. The courtship that followed was unlike anything you might imagine. Magnus would appear at unexpected moments, materializing from shadows, as if he had stepped through doorways that existed only for him. He would take me to places that shouldn't have existed. A library that was larger inside than outside, its shelves stretching impossibly high and filled with books written in languages that predated civilization. A garden where flowers bloomed in winter and snow fell upward in delicate spirals. A concert hall where the orchestra played music that could make you weep for sorrows you had never experienced and long for homelands you had never seen. "These are gifts," he would whisper against my ear as we danced to melodies that, seemed to emanate from the very stones beneath our feet. Small glimpses of the wonders that await those who are willing to step beyond the ordinary world. I knew what he was, of course. How could I not? The way shadows bent around him like living things. The fact that mirrors reflected his image, only when he willed them to. The way cats would follow him through the streets, as if he were their long-lost king. These were not the traits of mortal men. Magnus was something older, something that belonged to the spaces between seconds, the pause between heartbeats, the silence that exists in the moment before dawn breaks. He was beautiful and terrible and utterly impossible, and I loved him with a desperation that threatened to consume everything I had ever been. "Cordelia," he said to me one night as we stood on a balcony that overlooked all of London. The city spread below us like a carpet of fallen stars. "There are things about my nature that would frighten lesser souls. Powers that come with prices most would find unbearable to pay. I'm not afraid," I whispered, and at the time, I believed it to be true. He turned to face me then, his storm-grey eyes reflecting depths that seemed to hold centuries of accumulated sorrow. "You should be afraid, my darling Margaret, because what I'm about to tell you will change the very fabric of your existence." That night, Thomas revealed the truth of what he was. Not human, but something far older. A being from a realm that existed parallel to our own, where time moved differently and magic flowed like water through the very air. He had been sent to our world on a mission, he explained, though the details remained deliberately vague. "There are those in my realm who seek to bridge our worlds," he said, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw with a tenderness that made my heart ache. "But the consequences of such actions, they would be catastrophic for both our peoples." I listened, fascinated and terrified in equal measure, as he spoke of ancient prophecies and binding contracts, of powers that could reshape reality itself, and the terrible responsibility that came with wielding them. And then he told me the most shocking revelation of all. "I was sent here to find someone," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind that swept across the impossible balcony. "Someone whose bloodline carries the key to either saving both our worlds or destroying them entirely." "Who?" I asked, though something deep in my soul already knew the answer. "You, Margaret. It's you." The weeks that followed were a blur of wonder and terror. Thomas taught me about my heritage, about the ancient magic that flowed through my veins like a sleeping river waiting to be awakened. My grandmother, he revealed, had been like him, a being from the other realm who had chosen to live as a human, passing her supernatural nature down through the generations until it reached me. "The power skips generations sometimes," Thomas explained as we sat in that impossible library, surrounded by books that rewrote themselves as I watched. "Your mother had only traces of it, but in you, it runs pure and strong." He showed me how to access this power, how to step between shadows and move through spaces that didn't exist on any earthly map, how to hear the whispers of the wind and understand the language of growing things, how to see through the veil that separated our world from his, and glimpse the magnificent, terrifying realm that lay beyond. But with each lesson, each new revelation, I began to understand the true weight of what Thomas had been sent to do. The leaders of his realm were divided into two factions: those who wanted to use my power to merge the worlds completely, and those who believed the only way to protect both realms was to eliminate the bloodline entirely. Thomas, it turned out, had been sent by the second faction. "I was supposed to kill you," he confessed one night as we walked through a forest that existed only in the spaces between heartbeats. "That was my mission, my purpose for coming to your world." I stopped walking, the weight of his words settling over me like a shroud. "And now," he turned to face me, and I saw tears streaming down his cheeks, tears that glowed with an inner light like liquid starshine. Now I would die before allowing any harm to come to you. I love you, Margaret, with a devotion that transcends worlds, that defies the very laws of my existence. We were married in a ceremony that took place in 7 different dimensions simultaneously. The witnesses included creatures of myth and legend, beings of pure energy and ancient spirits that had watched the birth of stars. It was the most beautiful and impossible day of my life. For 3 years, we lived in a state of blissful suspension. Thomas used his powers to hide us from both factions of his realm, creating a pocket of safety where we could exist undisturbed. We traveled through countless worlds, saw wonders that no human eyes had ever witnessed, loved with an intensity that burned brighter than supernovas. And then I became pregnant with our son, Daniel. Everything changed the moment I felt that first flutter of life growing within me. The child I carried was something unprecedented, half human, half creature of magic, with the potential to wield powers that neither realm had ever imagined. Thomas felt it too. I could see the terror and awe warring in his expression as he placed his hand over my still flat stomach. "He will be extraordinary," Thomas whispered, but his voice carried undertones of deep concern. "More powerful than either of us can comprehend. Is that bad?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window of our cottage that currently existed somewhere between the Yorkshire moors and the crystal caves of his home realm. "Both factions will want him," he said finally. "They will hunt him, try to use him, attempt to control powers that should never be controlled." That's when Thomas made the decision that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "I have to leave," he said one morning, his face already beginning to fade at the edges, as he prepared to step back into his own realm permanently. "If I stay, they will find us. They will find him. But if I go, if I sever all connection to this world and to you, there's a chance they'll lose interest. A chance they'll believe the bloodline has ended." I begged him to stay. I threatened him, pleaded with him, offered to give up my own powers if it meant keeping our family together. But Thomas was resolute. "Our son will have choices to make when he comes of age," he said, kissing me one final time with lips that tasted of starlight and sorrow. "Powers to accept or reject, paths to follow or abandon. But those choices must be his alone, made freely without the influence of either realm, pushing him toward their own agendas." And then he was gone, vanishing like morning mist, leaving me alone and pregnant, and more heartbroken than I had ever imagined possible. Daniel was born on a night when the aurora borealis danced across the entire sky, even though we were nowhere near the poles. The nurses at the hospital whispered about the strange lights, the way the electrical equipment flickered whenever they brought him near, the fact that flowers in the maternity ward bloomed out of season. I took him home and raised him as a normal human child, though normal was a relative term, when your baby could make shadows dance across the nursery walls, and toys would rearrange themselves while he slept. I learned to hide his abilities, to teach him from an early age that these gifts were our secret, something that must never be revealed to the outside world. As Daniel grew older, the manifestations of his otherworldly heritage became more pronounced and harder to conceal. He could speak to animals, heal minor injuries with a touch, and sometimes I would find him playing with children who weren't there, or rather, who were there, but existing in other dimensions that only he could perceive. "Mama," he said to me once, when he was 7 years old, "why do I see things that other people don't?" I knelt down to his level, looking into eyes that were the exact shade of storm grey as his father's, and made a decision that I both blessed and cursed every day afterward. "Because you're special, sweetheart," I told him. "But sometimes being special means we have to be very careful about who we share our gifts with." I never told him about his father, never revealed the truth of his heritage. I convinced myself it was for his protection. That knowledge of his true nature would only put him in danger. But deep down, I knew the real reason for my silence. I was terrified. Terrified that if Daniel learned the truth, he would choose to follow his father's path back to that other realm. Terrified that I would lose the only family I had left. Terrified that the powers flowing through his veins would consume him the way they had nearly consumed me. So I kept our secrets, and I raised my son to believe he was simply gifted in ways that needed to remain hidden. When he began to ask harder questions, as a teenager, I deflected them. When his abilities grew stronger and more difficult to control, I helped him suppress them rather than learn to harness them properly. Daniel went to university, studied engineering, married a lovely girl named Helen, and seemed determined to live the most ordinary life possible. I thought I had succeeded in keeping him safe from the supernatural world that had shaped his very existence. And then Jennifer came into our lives. The first time Daniel brought her home, I knew immediately what she was. Not like Thomas, not a being from another realm, but something else entirely. A witch, though she clearly didn't know it herself. The power that flowed through her was wild, untrained, potentially dangerous in its raw intensity. More terrifying still was the way she looked at Daniel, the unconscious recognition that passed between them. She saw the otherness in him, just as he saw the hidden magic in her. They were drawn to each other with a force that transcended ordinary attraction. They were two supernatural beings, finding each other across a crowded room, their powers calling to each other like magnets seeking their opposite pole. I watched them fall in love, and with each passing day, I felt my carefully constructed world of normalcy beginning to crumble. "She's different," Daniel said to me one evening after Jennifer had gone home. "There's something about her, something I can't explain." "Different how?" I asked, though I already knew. Daniel struggled for words, his hands moving restlessly, as if trying to capture concepts that had no earthly equivalent. "It's like she sees me, really sees me, in ways that no one else ever has. And when I'm with her, I feel like I could do anything, like I could fly or move mountains, or reshape the very fabric of reality." The irony was not lost on me. My son was describing the exact sensation I had felt when I first met his father. The recognition of one magical being encountering another, but where Thomas had been honest about his nature from the beginning. Danielle and Jennifer were both blind to their own supernatural heritage. I made another decision then, one that would haunt me for the next 20 years. I decided to keep them apart. Oh, I was subtle about it. I never forbade their relationship outright or made dramatic declarations. Instead, I employed the patient, persistent methods that mothers have perfected over millennia. I questioned Jennifer's suitability at every turn, highlighted her flaws, emphasized their differences. I arranged for Daniel to meet other girls, encouraged him to consider career opportunities in distant cities, planted seeds of doubt about whether their relationship could truly last. Most devastatingly of all, I began teaching Daniel to suppress his powers even more completely, convincing him that the strange sensations he felt around Jennifer were dangerous, unhealthy attractions to something that could only bring him harm. "You're young," I told him repeatedly. "There will be other girls, better matches. Don't tie yourself down to the first person who makes you feel different." It worked, though the process nearly destroyed all three of us. I watched Daniel pull away from Jennifer gradually, saw the confusion and hurt in her eyes as he became more distant, more guarded. I witnessed her own powers beginning to manifest in response to the emotional turmoil. Small objects moving when she wasn't looking, lights flickering when she was upset, an uncanny ability to sense other people's emotions that left her feeling overwhelmed and isolated. She began to think she was going insane. Daniel, meanwhile, threw himself into his engineering studies with a desperate intensity, as if academic achievement could somehow fill the void that Jennifer's absence had created in his life. He graduated with highest honors, accepted a position with a prestigious firm in Edinburgh, and seemed determined to build a life as far removed from magic and mystery as humanly possible. Jennifer finished her own education and moved to London, where she took a job at a non-profit organization and tried to convince herself that the strange experiences she'd been having were just products of stress and overwork. For 5 years, they lived separate lives, each carrying an emptiness they couldn't name and didn't understand. I told myself I had done the right thing, that I had protected them both from forces beyond their comprehension. But fate, it seems, has a way of correcting the course when mortals interfere with destinies written in starlight. Daniel and Jennifer met again at a conference in Manchester. He was there, representing his engineering firm. She was attending as part of her nonprofit's outreach program. 20 minutes of conversation over coffee, and all my careful work unraveled like a sweater with a pulled thread. This time, they were older, more confident, more aware of what they wanted from life. And what they wanted was each other, with an intensity that made their teenage romance seem like a pale shadow of the real thing. They were married 6 months later, despite my every effort to dissuade them. Standing in the church, watching my son slip a ring onto Jennifer's finger, I felt the universe shifting around us like tectonic plates, finding new positions. The air itself seemed to shimmer with potential energy, and I knew that their union had awakened something that I had spent decades trying to keep dormant. That night, lying alone in my bed, I felt a familiar presence at the edge of my consciousness, a whisper of otherworldly awareness that I hadn't experienced since Thomas left all those years ago. They were watching again. Both factions of Thomas's realm had sensed the awakening, recognized the signs that the bloodline they had thought dormant was stirring back to life, and this time, it wasn't just Daniel they would be interested in. Jennifer was pregnant within the year. As her belly grew, so did the manifestations of supernatural energy around them both. Daniel's suppressed abilities began reasserting themselves with a vengeance, as if 20+ years of enforced dormancy had only made them stronger. Jennifer's untapped witchcraft responded to her pregnancy hormones by amplifying exponentially, causing what she described as the strangest good luck, but which I recognized as reality bending itself to accommodate her unconscious desires. And the baby. Oh, the baby was going to be extraordinary. This child would be the offspring of 2 magical bloodlines, carrying not just the otherworldly heritage of its grandfather, but also the earth-based power of its mother's witch ancestry. The potential contained within those tiny developing cells was beyond anything either realm had ever encountered. I knew that this time, I couldn't protect them through ignorance and separation. This time, they would need to understand exactly what they were facing. So I began to write. Night after night, I sat at my desk and poured out the truth of everything. Thomas's real nature, Daniel's heritage, Jennifer's own magical abilities, the factions that would soon come seeking their child. I wrote about the years of lies and deception, about the love that had driven me to make choices that had hurt everyone I cared about. I wrote about prophecies and possibilities, about the terrible responsibility that would soon rest on their shoulders. I wrote letters I never intended to send, confessions I never planned to make, apologies for sins they didn't even know I had committed. And then little Emma was born. The moment that child drew her first breath, the hospital's entire electrical system went haywire. Every flower in a 6-block radius bloomed simultaneously. 3 separate people reported seeing shooting stars in broad daylight, and somewhere in a realm beyond earthly dimensions, alarms began sounding that would not be ignored. Emma was beautiful, perfect, and utterly unprecedented. When she looked at me with eyes that seemed to hold galaxies, I knew that everything was about to change. She was 6 months old when the first visitors arrived. I was babysitting Emma while Daniel and Jennifer went to their first movie together since the birth, a small attempt to maintain some semblance of normal married life. I was holding her in the nursery, singing an old lullaby that my grandmother had taught me, when the temperature in the room suddenly dropped by 20 degrees. 3 figures materialized in the corner, their forms shifting between human appearance and something far more alien and beautiful. I recognized the signs immediately, emissaries from Thomas's realm, though I couldn't tell which faction they represented. Margaret Wilson. The central figure spoke, though its mouth didn't move, and the words seemed to echo directly inside my skull. The awakening has been felt across all dimensions. The child must be evaluated. I clutched Emma closer to my chest, feeling her tiny form grow warm in response to the supernatural presence. "She's just a baby," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "She is the convergence of 3 bloodlines," another figure intoned. "Human, otherworldly, and earth witch. Her potential is unprecedented. What do you want with her?" "That depends entirely on what she becomes," the third figure said, "and what she chooses to do with the power that flows through her veins." They vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving me alone with my granddaughter, and the terrible knowledge that our borrowed time of normalcy was over. I made the decision that night to tell Daniel and Jennifer everything. No more secrets, no more lies, no more attempts to shield them from the truth of what they were and what their daughter represented. They deserved to know what they were facing, deserved the chance to prepare for the challenges ahead. But before I could work up the courage to have that conversation, Jennifer found my diary. I had left it on the kitchen table the night before, too exhausted from writing to put it away properly. She had come over early to pick up Emma, seen the leather-bound book lying open to a page that detailed Thomas's otherworldly nature and the supernatural heritage flowing through Daniel's veins. I heard her gasp from the kitchen, heard the diary hit the floor, heard her footsteps as she fled the house without taking Emma or saying a word. That was yesterday. Now I lie here in my bed, knowing that Jennifer has spent the night reading 20 years' worth of confessions and revelations, knowing that she's probably shared everything with Daniel, knowing that they're both struggling to process the truth of what their family really is. Part of me is terrified of facing them, of seeing the anger and hurt and betrayal in their eyes when they realize how long I've been lying to them. Part of me is relieved that the burden of secrecy has finally been lifted from my shoulders. But mostly, I'm worried about Emma, because now that the truth is out, now that Daniel and Jennifer know about their own supernatural nature, their powers will strengthen and grow, and as their abilities develop, Emma's will respond and amplify in turn. She will become a beacon that supernatural beings across multiple dimensions will be drawn to, like moths to flame. Some will come to help, to guide, to teach. Others will come to use, to control, to harvest the unprecedented power flowing through her small body. And still others will come to destroy, believing that eliminating the child is the only way to prevent catastrophic changes to the balance between realms. The next few months will determine not just the fate of my family, but possibly the future of multiple worlds. As I dictate these final words to the voice recorder that Jennifer bought me for Christmas, I can hear voices downstairs. Daniel and Jennifer returned at last, their tones urgent and afraid as they discuss what they've learned. Soon they will come upstairs, and we will have the conversation that should have happened decades ago. I only hope they can find it in their hearts to forgive a foolish old woman who loved them too much and protected them too little. The diary Jennifer found contains instructions, warnings, and contact information for allies in both the human and supernatural worlds. It explains the signs to watch for as Emma grows, the training she'll need to control her abilities, the choices she'll eventually face about which path to follow. Most importantly, it contains the truth about her grandfather Thomas. Not just what he was, but where he went and how he might be reached if the need becomes desperate enough. Because despite everything I've told you about protection and separation, despite all my fears about the dangers of supernatural contact, I know that Emma will need her grandfather's guidance in the years to come. The powers she carries are too complex, too unprecedented for any single person or faction to understand completely. She will need someone who has walked between worlds, someone who understands the delicate balance that must be maintained to keep both realms safe. She will need someone who loves her family enough to risk everything for their protection. She will need Thomas. And now that the truth is finally out, now that the secrets have been revealed, and the supernatural world has begun to take notice, it's only a matter of time before she gets her chance to meet him. I hear footsteps on the stairs now. Daniel and Jennifer coming to confront me at last. My heart is pounding with fear and hope in equal measure. This conversation will either heal the wounds I've spent decades creating, or it will tear our family apart forever. But regardless of what happens next, I can face these final days knowing that I've finally told the truth. Emma will grow up understanding exactly who and what she is, equipped with knowledge that I denied her father for far too long, and maybe, just maybe, that will be enough to keep her safe in the extraordinary world that awaits her. The door is opening now. Danielle's face appears, followed by Jennifer's, both of them carrying expressions of shock, hurt, love, and desperate hope. "Grandma Margaret," Daniel says softly, "we need to talk." "Yes, my darling boy. Yes, we do." If you found this story as captivating and mysterious as I promised, make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell. There are more family secrets and shocking revelations waiting to be uncovered, and you won't want to miss a single one. Share this story with someone who loves a good mystery. Trust me, they'll thank you for it. Until next time, remember that every family has secrets, but some secrets can change the world.